What if the key to your entire future was hiding in your past, worn on a chain around your neck? What if a life of struggle could be undone by one chance encounter? For Ilara, a waitress whose kindness was as constant as the ache in her feet, a single cup of coffee changed everything. This is a story about a forgotten locket, a life-altering offer, and a test of character so demanding it could shatter her spirit or reveal the truth of who she was always meant to be. The fluorescent lights of the Greystone diner hummed a tired, buzzing tune, the same one they'd hummed every night of Ilara's life. At 24, she moved through the narrow aisles with a practiced grace, balancing plates of cooling fries and lukewarm gravy. Each step was a quiet negotiation with exhaustion. The tips from her double shift would barely cover the new prescription for her grandmother's heart condition, a constant worry that lived like a cold stone in her chest. She refilled a coffee cup for a trucker, offered a tired smile to a couple huddled in a booth, and felt the familiar weight of the world on her shoulders. It was then that he walked in. The diner, with its cracked vinyl and sticky tabletops, seemed to shrink in his presence. He was older, dressed in a suit so dark and perfectly tailored it seemed to absorb the light around it. His face was a mask of stoic control, but his eyes, a sharp, piercing gray, missed nothing. He took a seat at the counter, a stark island of wealth in a sea of weary, working-class patrons. Ilara approached, her notepad in hand. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. He simply nodded. As she poured the dark liquid, the silver locket she always wore, a gift from the mother she never knew, swung forward on its chain. The man's eyes locked onto it. The composed mask on his face flickered, replaced by a flash of something unreadable. Shock, pain, recognition. He said nothing, but his gaze remained fixed on the small, starling-engraved oval at her throat. The air crackled with a sudden, inexplicable tension. He had not just seen pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She dialed the number. A sterile, professional voice answered, but when she gave her name, she was put through to him instantly. "I have a proposition for you," Alistair Finch said, his voice devoid of any warmth. He didn't ask about her life or her job. He spoke with the detached precision of a surgeon. He offered her a position as his personal assistant. The duties were vague: organizing his private affairs, managing his schedule, assisting with his personal correspondence. The salary he named was so astronomical it felt like a prank. It was more money than she could hope to earn in 20 years at the diner. It was enough to afford the best doctors, the best care for her grandmother. It was enough to breathe. "Why me?" Ilara asked, the words barely a whisper. "You seem capable," he replied, the answer as opaque as the man himself. "And you are a person of integrity. I can see it." He paused. "I require discretion above all else. The position begins tomorrow. A car will be waiting for you at 7 a.m. The line went dead before she could respond, leaving only a dial tone, and a choice that felt less like an opportunity and more like a precipice. She was terrified, but the image of her grandmother's tired, hopeful face solidified her resolve. She had to take the leap. The next morning, a silent, black car transported Ilara from her gritty, graffiti-lined street to a gleaming steel and glass tower that pierced the clouds. Alistair Finch's penthouse was a world of cold marble, minimalist furniture, and panoramic windows that looked down on the city like a king surveying his kingdom. It was vast, silent, and suffocatingly clean. Her new life had begun, but it felt more like a gilded cage than a rescue. Her duties were as strange and impersonal as her surroundings. She organized books that looked untouched, filed papers that seemed to have no purpose, and managed a schedule for a man who rarely left his office. Alistair was a ghost in his own home. He spoke to her in clipped, formal sentences, his gray eyes always guarded. She began to understand that she hadn't been hired for her skills as an assistant. She had been brought here for a reason that was somehow tied to the small silver heart hanging around her neck. Her investigation began not with a conscious decision, but with a pull, a need to understand the invisible strings that had drawn her into this strange, lonely world. The first sign of open hostility arrived in a cloud of expensive cologne and dismissive arrogance. His name was Marcus Finch, Alistair's nephew and the sole heir to the Finch empire. He breezed into the penthouse one afternoon, his perfectly coiffed hair and condescending smirk a stark contrast to his uncle's severe austerity. He took one look at Alara, her simple dress a stark anomaly in the luxurious space, and his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "And who might you be?" he asked, his tone dripping with disdain, as if she were a piece of furniture that had been moved out of place. "I'm Mr. Finch's new personal assistant," Alara replied, her chin held high, refusing to be intimidated. Marcus laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of any humor. "An assistant? Uncle Alistair hasn't had an assistant in a decade. He prefers his solitude." He circled her slowly, his gaze clinical and insulting. "You don't look the part. What did you do? Spill coffee on him and get a job out of pity?" From that day on, Marcus became a shadow of antagonism in her new life. He would appear unannounced, questioning her tasks, accidentally spilling documents she had just organized, and making snide remarks just loud enough for her to hear. He was a predator, sensing a threat to his territory. To him, Alara was an inexplicable variable in a carefully controlled equation, and he was determined to solve for her, preferably by eliminating her from it entirely. "You should know," he said to her one evening, cornering her in the hallway as she was leaving. "My uncle is an eccentric man. He indulges in whims. But whims pass. People like you," he gestured vaguely at her, "are temporary. The family, however, is permanent. Don't get any ideas." The white sheets and the faint scent of cedar and grief. As Alara carefully sorted through boxes of old financial ledgers and corporate awards, her fingers brushed against a small rosewood box tucked away on a bottom shelf. It was unlocked. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, were bundles of letters tied with silk ribbon and a small, leather-bound photo album. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This felt different. This felt personal. She opened the album first. The black and white photographs depicted a younger Alistair, his face not yet hardened by time and solitude. He was smiling, truly smiling, and in every picture he was with a beautiful young black woman with kind, joyful eyes. In one photo, the woman was laughing, her head thrown back, and around her neck was a locket. A silver, starling-engraved locket, identical to the one Alara wore. A tremor went through Alara's hands. She turned to the letters. They were written in Alistair's elegant, slanted script, addressed to "My dearest Lily." They were love letters, filled with passionate declarations and secret plans for a future together. A future his powerful, prejudiced family would never approve of. One letter, dated 25 years ago, spoke of their unborn child. "I don't care if it's a boy or a girl," Alistair had written. "I only care that they have your eyes and your courageous heart. We will build a life far from my father's shadows. I promise you." The last letter in the box was not from Alistair. It was a formal, typed letter from a private investigator, addressed to Alistair's father. It detailed a tragic car accident on a rain-slicked country road. It spoke of a single fatality, Lily. There was no mention of a child. Ilara sank to the floor. The letters spread around her like fallen leaves. The mystery was no longer just Alistair's. It was hers. The woman in the photo, the woman with her locket, was her mother. A wave of questions crashed over her. If her mother died in that crash, how did she survive? Back to her, a rigid silhouette against the morning light. On his desk lay an open folder containing sensitive, confidential financial documents. Beside it was her purse, and sticking out of it was a flash drive. "Marcus's security team found this in your bag at the lobby checkpoint," Alistair said, his voice dangerously quiet. "It contains copies of these files. Files that were being shopped to our biggest corporate rival." The accusation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It was a perfect frame-up. Her past as a struggling waitress, her sudden elevation, her access. It all painted a compelling picture of a desperate girl seizing a golden opportunity. "I didn't do this," Ilara said, her voice shaking but firm. "This is Marcus. He's trying to get rid of me." Alistair turned, his grey eyes unreadable, searching her face. "He says you've been prying into my personal history. He says you're a con artist who targeted me from the beginning." This was her test. She could see the flicker of doubt in Alistair's eyes, the battle between his hardened cynicism and the strange, inexplicable pull he felt toward her. She could run. She could let the lie win and disappear back into the life she knew. Or she could stand her ground. Taking a deep breath, she looked him straight in the eye. "I was looking into your past because it's my past, too," she said, her voice clear and strong. "You can believe him or you can believe me. But if you fire me, you will never know the truth." She didn't plead. She didn't cry. She stood before him, armed with nothing but her own integrity, and waited for the verdict. Alistair stared at her, the silence in the room stretching for an eternity. He saw no deceit in her eyes, only a profound, wounded strength that resonated with the broken parts of his own soul. He had spent a lifetime building walls, trusting no one. But the raw honesty in her gaze dismantled them brick by brick. He had seen that same courage once before, in the eyes of the woman he had loved and lost. Family's pedigree and power. "My father forbade the relationship," Alistair confessed, his voice cracking. "He said he would disinherit me, ruin her, do whatever it took to keep us apart." They had planned to run away. Lily was pregnant, and they were going to start a new life in Europe. The night they were supposed to leave, she was driving to meet him at their secret rendezvous point. She never arrived. "My father's men found me first," Alistair said, his eyes distant. "They told me there had been an accident. They gave me the police report, a death certificate. They told me she was gone. Both of them." He had collapsed, broken. His father used his grief to mold him, to harden him, turning him into the cold, isolated man he was today. He never loved again. He never suspected the truth, that the accident was no accident. It was a lie, orchestrated to separate them forever. "I believed them," he whispered, his gaze finally meeting hers. "For 25 years, I believed you were gone." The full, staggering truth settled between them. He wasn't just a man who had loved her mother. He was her father. The locket wasn't just a keepsake. It was a link to a life, a family she was never supposed to know. The revelation was not a gentle dawn, but a lightning strike, illuminating the darkness of the past and changing everything forever. The grief and shock that filled the room quickly hardened into a cold, shared fury. The puzzle was almost complete, but one piece remained: the modern-day conspiracy. It was no longer just about Alastair's father. It was about the lies that had been perpetuated since. "My father is dead," Alastair stated, his voice now laced with steel. "But my brother, Robert, Marcus's father, took over the family's private affairs. If anyone knew the full truth, it was him. And if Robert knew, then Marcus knew." The frame-up wasn't just about getting rid of a potential rival. It was about protecting a generational secret, a monstrous lie that had stolen Ilara's birthright. His legal team had unearthed in the past few hours records of a secret trust fund, established by his father for an unforeseen contingency. For 25 years, that fund had been systematically drained by Marcus's father, Robert, and, more recently, by Marcus himself. It was the money meant to keep Lily and her child silent, had they survived. When they were presumed dead, it became a personal slush fund. "You knew," Ilara said, her voice ringing with the clarity of truth. "You knew she had a child. You knew who I was the moment you saw this locket, didn't you?" Marcus, cornered and exposed, finally broke. His arrogance dissolved into a torrent of resentful confession. "She was nobody," he spat, his face contorted with rage. "You were nobody. That money, this company, it was my birthright, not for some mistake my uncle made half a lifetime ago." The confession, born of pure, unadulterated arrogance, was the final nail in his coffin. Justice was swift and absolute. Marcus's confession, recorded by the office's security system, was all the evidence Alastair's legal team needed. The full weight of Finch Global Enterprises descended upon Marcus and his father. They were immediately exiled from the company and the family, their assets frozen pending criminal investigation for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The Finch name, once their shield, was now the sword that cut them off entirely. They lost everything: their power, their wealth, their future. For Ilara, justice was quieter but infinitely more profound. The first thing Alastair did was arrange for her grandmother to be moved to the best private hospital in the country, with a team of top specialists overseeing her care. The weight of that worry, a burden she had carried for years, simply evaporated. Then came the public announcement. Alastair Finch, the city's most powerful recluse, introduced Ilara Finch as his daughter and heir. The news sent shockwaves through the business world, but for Ilara and Alastair, it was a simple declarative act of truth. Their new reality began to take shape not in boardrooms or press conferences. The opulent apartment no longer felt like a cage. It was slowly becoming a home, filled now with framed photos of her and her grandmother, and even a few of her and a cautiously smiling Alastair. Her grandmother, responding well to the new treatments, was living in a comfortable suite on a lower floor, her laughter now a frequent sound in the once silent halls. Alistair came to stand beside her, handing her a cup of tea. The silence between them was no longer heavy with unspoken words, but comfortable, filled with a nascent, resilient bond. They weren't just a CEO and his heir. They were a father and a daughter, piecing together a family from the wreckage of a devastating lie. "She had your eyes," Alistair said softly, looking out at the skyline. "Your mother. She saw the world not for what it was, but for what it could be." Ilara leaned her head on his shoulder, a simple gesture that would have been unimaginable just a short time ago. She had walked into the Greystone diner, a girl drowning in debt and despair. And now she stood here, with a past that was finally hers and a future that was wide open. Her journey had been one of unimaginable discovery, proving that integrity is a light that no amount of darkness can extinguish. Her kindness, the one thing she could always afford to give, had been the key that unlocked it all. What if the most valuable thing you possess isn't money or power, but the character you build when you have nothing else? If this story of truth, family, and resilience touched your heart, please consider showing your support. Like this video, share it with someone who might need a little hope, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the strength of the human spirit. Your engagement helps us continue to bring these powerful narratives to light. Thank you for watching.